Welcome back, second grade. Today is June 15th, 2020. So last week we read about collecting items, ideas of what to be when we get older. We even read about the amazing octopus, and we even read about snakes. Okay, so today we are going to be reading Cinderella, and we're going to be comparing, contrasting it to Cinderella. So you're wondering, whoa, what's going on? So our standard for today is RL 2.9. Our objective is compare and contrast Cinderella and Cinderella. And our I can statement is I can read a text in order to compare and contrast two or more versions of the same story. So let's get started. Okay, so fairy tales. So, of course, today you're going to be reading a fairy tale, but it's going to be a different version of the fairy tale that we know, Cinderella. So, a fairy tale is a fabricated story. We know that it could be magical, it's imaginary land and animals. Sometimes you can have good characters, bad characters, and so on. So, what I mentioned before is that Cinderella is a different version of Cinderella, but it's still a fairy tale. So you may find books such as Hansel and Gretel, The Three Little Pigs, where you'll find many different versions of this same story. And they change it up, and they change the characters around, but kind of the story is very similar, but different at the same time. So as I mentioned before, today we will be reading Cinderella, written by Evan Russell, illustrated by Alex Lopez. So when reading today, you must take your time, of course, but then also want to take a moment so that you can stop and think about what you're reading for comprehension. So you want to be able to retell the main events in the story. So that means at times you may have to stop to figure out what am I reading and ask yourself some questions. Comparing and contrasting. So comparing means to tell how two or more things, qualities, or events are alike. And then contrast means to tell how two or more things are different. And most of the time we use a Venn diagram to help us organize our similarities and differences between stories, characters, settings, problems, and etc. And then sometimes you might answer questions of how are they alike? How are they different? How are they similar? And that is comparing and contrasting. So that's what we're going to do today with Cinderella and Cinderella. So you have to use information that you already know about Cinderella. So remember, Cinderella is a story about a young lady whose father died when she was younger, who ended up being moved in with her stepmother and her stepsisters, where they didn't treat her the best. She had to always cook and clean, and she was never rewarded for anything that she ever did. And she was a really good girl. Until one day she met her fairy godmother, and then her fairy godmother decided to say, you know what, you can go to this ball that everyone else is going to in town. Next thing you know, she finds her Prince Charming, and they live a happy life, happy ever after. So that's just a sum up of Cinderella. So then today you want to compare and contrast the two events or the two stories that you read today and what you already have heard before or read before. Now going over our glossary. So remember, our glossary tells us the definition of what our words mean, and we can find that at the end of our text or at the end of our book. So looking at the first word, it is chores. Small groups or tasks that must be done regularly. So most of us, now that we're older, we're going to third grade, that we might clean up our room, we might clean the living room, we might wash our dishes, we might sweep the floor. Those are doing small jobs or tasks that must be done regularly, or your house will not be cleaned. Golfed, which is laugh suddenly and loudly. So it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. So a bust out in laughter. Pitcher, the baseball or softball player who throws the ball that the batter tries to hit. So not the guy who actually hits the ball, but the guy who's throwing the ball towards the batter, towards the actual base bat. Next word, spatula, a long-handed kitchen tool with a wide, flat surface that is used to mix, spread, or lift things. So we use this in the kitchen when we cook things. Maybe sometimes you might see people use it to cook eggs, grilled cheese. So it's used for a lot of things, but it's mostly used in the kitchen to cook. Transformed, change in form or appearance. So the best way for us to remember is think about just the movie Transformers or the TV show Transformers or the toys Transformers. And we know that they can transform from a robot to a car or a car to a robot. So it's changing the form of your appearance. So Miss Richardson, for instance, she might change her appearance, transform into big hair, small hair, hair up in a bun, hair braids. So it's to change your appearance of what you look like. Tryouts. So events where activities are used to test how good people are in athletics or performing. So for instance, before we had to do online learning, we were going to have a tryout for ACCS. So if you could sing, if you could dance, if you played the instrument, if you had any talent, you would be able to show that so that you can be able to have an opportunity to perform that in front of people. So, as I said before, it's very important that you stop and think so that you can be able to retell your story. But also, when you stop and think, you can think about these questions such as, what was Mateo's dream? In what ways did the twins treat Mateo unfairly? Why was Mateo not allowed to attend the tryouts? Why did the twins try on the shoe when the coach came to the house? So these are questions that you can ask yourself when reading the story. Stop and think to be able to retell your story. Also, what we want to do is pay attention to the illustrations. So often the illustrator tells the reader many things that are not written by the author. So it allows you to kind of see a little bit more into the story and make you actually think deeper than what you are reading. So I'm going to read page 5 and show how the illustration helps us give more information than what is written by the author. Mateo's stepfather had twin sons. Mateo was happy to have 2 new brothers, but the twins, Primo and Guapo, were spoiled, mean, and greedy. They didn't like Mateo. Mateo asked if they wanted to play baseball. We would never play baseball with a runt like you, Primo said. Actually, we'll never play with you at all, added Guapo. So as you see in the illustration, it shows that Mateo is sitting on his bed crying. And so although it's not showing the confrontation between the 2 boys and Mateo, it's still showing his emotions after the boys said what they said to him. So of course that made him sad. And of course it made him want to isolate himself and be by himself and kind of cry to himself. Okay, so now moving on. Consonant diagram CH. So remember, when the C and the H is together, it makes the ch sound. For instance, that's the word up here, champ. So sometimes the CH may be at the end of a word or it may be at the beginning of the word. But that is our digraph. So that is just a reminder. Then we have possessive nouns. Now remember, a possessive noun shows ownership by adding a apostrophe, then a s. For an example, Mateo's mother married a rich man. So Mateo's with the apostrophe s shows that the mother belongs to Mateo. So it's not that Mateo owns his mother, but what belongs to Mateo is his mother. So when we see the apostrophe s, we know that that person or that thing owns something, or that noun owns something. Okay, second grade, so now it's time for you to work. See you at the slides.